session one is called Awareness and Automatic Pilot. And so the whole goal of this session is to help people understand how often we get caught up in automatic pilot. This mode that our mind gets into where we're barely even aware of what we're doing. We do things so automatically we don't notice it. And that's not always a bad thing, right? When you drive a car, you tend to want to be able to drive automatically, but sometimes you end up driving places without paying any attention and you make wrong turns or you end up in the wrong place. So we also want the ability to pay attention. And so we're contrasting automatic pilot with mindfulness, with awareness, with noticing. Now, if this is the very first session you're doing and you didn't do an introductory session, this is when you would want to, again, talk about what this is about and any informed consent, all of those kinds of things, any rules about confidentiality, especially if you're doing it as a group. And if you're doing it as a group, to have introductions. But in this case, it was just me and John. And so once we settled in and talked about the informed consent, we jumped right into the first exercise. And the first exercise is just to eat one raisin. Now, people sometimes ask me, well, why a raisin? And the short answer is that's what John Kabat-Zinn did back in the 1970s when this MBSR program got started and people kept doing it. You could literally do anything. A raisin's easy because it tends not to spoil, and usually people don't have allergies to that. But you could literally do it with almost any small piece of food. The point is to take some small piece of food and pay attention. So the exercise is just to notice it as if you've never seen anything like this, as if you dropped in from another planet. And then you engage all your senses. You look at it, you smell it, you roll it and see if it makes a sound, and touch it to your lips, and then eat it very, very slowly and taste all the different sensations. And so that's our introduction to mindfulness, is just, what did you notice during that exercise? And by the way, these are the three questions we always ask after a mindfulness exercise. And I would argue this mindful inquiry process is even more important than doing a mindfulness exercise, because otherwise you have no idea what's going on in their mind. So how you process it afterwards is important. So the first question we ask after a mindfulness exercise is, what did you notice? From a purely practical, concrete point of view, what did you notice? And people may say, I hated it, for example. This is important. You don't want to make good or bad or try to fix it or anything. This is about noticing. So you said you hated it. Did you notice that as you were doing it or afterwards? Or right afterwards I thought I hated it. Okay, well, what did you notice during it? Well, I kept thinking this is stupid. Okay, so this thought, this is stupid, was there. What did you actually taste? Well, it was kind of gross. Okay, well, how did you experience gross? Well, it was kind of mushy. And now I may or may not ask that many questions when I've just met the person. But the whole point, as you can start to pick up on, is I want to model this attitude of noticing, of acceptance of your experience in this moment, whether you like it or not. Separating out, this is a thought, this is an emotion, this is a sensation going on. And so we want to model that in this inquiry process. We're not trying to get them to the right answer. We just want them to practice noticing and paying attention. Now, the second question we always ask after a mindfulness exercise is, how is this different than the way you would normally do whatever the activity was, in this case, eating? And in this case, most people will recognize, normally I just shovel food down and then I look down and it's gone. So I think I must need more, and I don't pay any attention. I don't usually engage my senses. I don't usually pause to actually notice things. And so this is getting at that automatic pilot mode that we tend to get into. And by the way, there are lots of answers. You don't have to have the right one. And if the person says, I don't know, you can always offer a few of your own pieces to this. But it emphasizes that they chose to do something differently, and that's why they got a different outcome. The third question we always ask is, well, why do you think we're doing this? And this is a really important question. What's the point? What's the practical value? You came here, in John's case, you came here to help prevent depression from coming back, to deal with anxiety, and to learn to live with your pain. Why do you think we're eating a raisin? And, it's important to ask that question because they're already thinking it anyway, right? And in his case, John was able to see, well, I noticed some things about a raisin I never noticed before. Maybe this will help me notice things about my pain and notice things about my anxiety and depression, which is a really great answer. And one of the reasons it's good to do this is because if they come up with reasons it might be helpful for them, they're probably more likely to actually try the exercises than if you're sitting there saying this is good for you and you better do this. So, and even if they had a bad experience or a so-called negative experience, it's good for them to recognize, well, this is what my mind does when unpleasant things happen. Or maybe I automatically have this emotion or reaction. And so we're trying to help them just pay attention. And that's another really important point about this. It's great if they have a pleasant experience and they say, I loved it and I enjoyed it. But that's not necessarily the goal, because life is not always going to be pleasant and enjoyable. We want to help them just pay attention to what is happening.